Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Shay Mann and I will be your moderator. Today's webinar is in listen-only mode, so if you have any questions throughout the event, go ahead and submit those in the Q&A panel and we will answer them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. This session will be recorded and we will email you a link to the recorded version tomorrow. I'd like to take a second to briefly introduce our speakers that we have today. First, we have Rick Weinberg, Senior Director of Product Management here at SailPoint, and we have Nassos Kladikis, Senior Manager, Product Marketing at Microsoft. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Rick Weinberg to kick us off.
Thanks, Shay. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be residing. We've got a great session for you today. We're excited to talk to you a little bit about how Microsoft and SailPoint have a great solution, for you all that are seeking some enterprise security solutions. To kick things off, we're going to really start with just touching on some of the market conditions we're seeing. I'm going to transition over to Nassos, who's going to discuss some of the importance of identity and how that ties into not only the security but also the productivity elements in the business. And we'll go through some of the integration itself and provide you a live demonstration of that integration. And then, of course, wrap up with some Q&A. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. So, as we look at some of these market conditions, it's interesting. What we're really starting to see emerge is more of a digital transformation economy. In fact, Gartner projected recently that CEOs expect their digital revenue to increase by more than 80% by 2020. So it's no surprise behind why, as you see here from the quote from Forbes, predicting that digital transformation will become, a key strategic thrust for many CEOs. But what's behind this, right? So what is it really that's driving this? Well, there's several factors that we're seeing. First is, you've got this notion of a distributed, mobile workforce. Organizations now have a much broader integrated partner ecosystem. And really the growth of shadow IT as a whole, it continues to make it much easier to share sensitive data between individuals and entities themselves. At the same time, we're also starting to see, reduction in some IT budgets, particularly for those services that can be driven from the cloud, or even a shifted increase in demand on resources themselves. At the same time, we also see that, innovation, of course, increases opportunities to really create more disruptive market-changing investments, and those become much more attainable as a result. There's certainly a time-to-market piece of this that gets accelerated, as well as, when organizations have the ability to quickly launch a new service, or enter a new market themselves, which can be further enabled by this digital transformation. And we also see a significant amount of just operational efficiencies becoming better and more effective at the current business itself. And ultimately what drives this is, in many cases, the competitive edge that most organizations are seeking, to continue to maintain an edge in their business. So when we look at, some of the digital transformation, imperatives in particular, there are three that really we see as critical for success, and in some cases really just remain a cost of doing business as organizations make this digital transformation. Not surprisingly, cloud is one of them. As organizations are moving their workloads to the cloud, certainly the TCO and really agility benefits themselves are significant. Of course, the rate and pace that an organization might go to the cloud, based in many cases on their existing infrastructure, will vary, but it's a tremendous force. You've got security as well. What's the saying? A reputation takes years to build, but can only take minutes to be ruined, right? And security, in some ways, is a protector of that reputation, and so it's foundational for digital transformation. And compliance, in many cases, it's a necessary evil, right? We know many organizations still have to invest significantly in maintaining, compliance to the regulatory mandates, and again, in often cases, it's a cost of doing business, but can be a very significant one. So, it's not surprising, of course, that, as we look at these imperatives, that we're part of a new world, right? And data breaches are the new normal. It's not if, but when a next data breach is going to occur. I mean, frankly, it used to be that network security was all we needed. Remember back in the day when you have employees come into the office, access the network, and to do their jobs, that's what they needed. And many events, intruders, would either have to come into the physical location or hack from outside the network, right? And as they become more creative, a lot more the network security technologies evolved. You move from basic firewalls to next-gen firewalls, web app firewalls. You move from intrusion detection to intrusion prevention. And so ultimately the hackers evolved as well, and they've really moved more to social engineering elements to drive that. And so what's happening is the most common attack vector isn't so much SQL injections or cross-site scripting as much as it might be us, people. Right, and now as we saw with even recently with the WannaCry malware, malware may be a common vehicle, but it's often depending on people themselves to infiltrate, right? And so what we see as well is that these exposure points have exploded, and ultimately reconciling that network security is just not enough. And as I mentioned earlier, the notion of a much more distributed and mobile world that we have, it really makes it no longer necessary for employees to be in that same physical space to collaborate, right? They're much more distributed and virtual in that manner. And so business users now span employees, contractors, partners who are all accessing applications and data from a variety of different devices, not only personal ones, but, of course, from all over the world to boot. And so what we're starting to see here is that, the sheer volume of users and applications and the various levels of data access, it's easy to imagine, a billion points of access for one given enterprise to have to deal with, which is pretty overwhelming. But these points of access can, easily become points of exposure, right? And in some cases, a billion points of exposure, and really behind all these points of access is an identity. And unfortunately, as we all know, it only takes one of these points of exposure to be compromised to cause these problems. And with that point of exposure, often cases, there's a person, a user associated to that. And this isn't necessarily due to miscreants, so to speak, who are, very vindictive in any nature. It's often due to negligence, right? And only a small crack is truly needed here. So with this, I'm going to transition over to Nazos, who's going to take you to the next portion of the presentation. Nazos?
Thank you, Rick. I'm Nazos Kladakis. I'm the Global Product Marketing Manager of Azure Active Directory in Microsoft. And thank you all from my side for being here. So I will continue from where Rick left it and say that all these exposure points, all these threats that we see are making the number one cyber threat. The number one cyber threat is the insider, is the user. And not because this user is malicious or he has bad intentions. It's because of the nature of the way that he works. And you can see on the second number we have in the screen that 63% of all the breaches are not involving a really sophisticated attack or a method that will try to attack your systems. 63% of all the breaches are coming from weak or easy to guess passwords. So we see that the identity, the credentials, the username and the password of the user are causing 63% of the breaches. And also you can see the last number that more than 80% of the employees admitting to use non-approved SaaS applications. And that means that no matter what you will do to protect their approved applications, or no matter what you will do to protect their network, their systems, their business laptops and devices, 80% of them will find other ways to communicate and do their business outside of your protected environment. So it's easy to blame the user here. It's easy to say the users are the problem, their credentials is the problem, or they are not serious, right? They are using other systems, they don't comply with the rules and the regulations of the company. But check this thing, check their current reality, right? You cannot blame the user for the current reality of business, right, of the cloud and digital transformation. They are using at least 2 or 3 devices to access applications on premises, and guess what? All the applications they want to use are now popping up in the cloud. The best collaboration application in the cloud, the best mail application in the cloud, and CRM and HR applications, and all the applications they need to use suddenly are in the cloud. So if you let them alone there, if you let them alone to deal with all these applications and all the passwords in all their devices, they will end up doing what they know better, do their job, and thinking and if possible, not at all about security. They will use the same passwords, the same weak passwords everywhere. They will share their passwords, and they will share business information through channels that are not secure. So what the IT department, what the organization should do to protect users and help them help them go through this new reality? They cannot use traditional measures for sure. If organizations go through traditional channels, they will fail again. This current reality that the users were seeing will become the current reality of the IT departments. You cannot deal with that with the tools of the old world. So here we are today, Microsoft and SailPoint suggesting a new approach, an approach that will solve the problem of the end user, meaning it will make them more productive, and at the same time, it will make them more protected, more secure, without compromising productivity. Let's talk about that. So we said that most of the companies out there, and hopefully your companies, are using something on premises for years. And that thing that they were using on premises for authentication and access management was mainly Microsoft's Windows Server Active Directory, but also other Active Directories. And you were doing so successfully for years. But now that you need to expand your reach, to extend your reach to cloud applications, any cloud application, from Azure and Office 365 to Google and Amazon and Box and Dropbox and all these applications that are out there, you need something new. And we really believe that that new approach is an identity and access management system in the cloud. Microsoft Azure Active Directory in our case. Azure Active Directory will help build a bridge between your on-premises directories, Microsoft or non-Microsoft on-premises directories, to Azure Active Directory, and through that bridge will take your users to any cloud application they want. Just imagine the application, and Azure Active Directory will take you there. And as I said, of course, it can help you for Office 365, which is one of the most popular cloud applications, but any other application goes, meaning from Google Apps to Amazon Web Services to Azure to Box to Dropbox, HR applications out there. Any cloud application on any cloud can be accessed easily and in a secure way from Azure Active Directory. And of course, the main concern of Azure Active Directory is to make this experience easy for the end user. As I told you before, and I think that's one of the most significant factors here, if you make the life of the user difficult, no matter how many security controls you will apply, you will fail. The user needs to see security infused in his everyday work in a way that will not be intrusive for him. So we believe that with Azure Active Directory, we have achieved that by creating simple experiences on any platform from Android and iOS to Windows devices to access all the applications they need from one screen. And from this one screen, they can also do things like reset their passwords if they forget them, change their passwords, join groups, join applications, and of course, collaborate with their partners and their customers in a way that it's not intrusive. So productivity is boosted. However, at the same time, security is everywhere. It's everywhere, and it's protecting users without being too annoying. Also, Azure Active Directory helps you access remotely, secure remote access to on-premise applications too. So your users will use one console, one screen to access all the applications they need in the cloud and on premises. So where SailPoint goes on that? SailPoint actually supports the system across the board, on premises, in the cloud, for productivity and collaboration. SailPoint Identity Governance adds and extends the value of Azure Active Directory so the users will be productive and secure everywhere. Why Microsoft and SailPoint? Why not someone else? Because identity and access management in the cloud, identity and access management as a service and governance is not something uniquely created by SailPoint and Microsoft. I will tell you why Microsoft and SailPoint. Microsoft is a leader in identity and access management on-premise and in the cloud, and it's a leader in productivity with many applications in the cloud. And SailPoint, of course, is the undisputed leader in identity governance. So I I will think, and I mean, please let us know if you agree, that bringing together two leaders in those two areas will create a solution and integration that will be beneficial for you, because you will get the experience of Microsoft on identity and access management, from Active Directory on premises to Azure Active Directory in the cloud, and the experience and the leadership of SailPoint in identity governance together in one integrated solution. Now, let's talk about Azure Active Directory. What are the areas that Azure Active Directory can help you be productive and protected at the same time, and how SailPoint with governance and other capabilities can help? So Azure Active Directory really believes that identity is the new control plane, really believes that Azure Active Directory can be the core of your business. And why is that? Because it can help you in those four use cases, in those four areas. The first area is the ability to use one identity to access all the applications you want. And as you can imagine, based on what I have said already in the previous slides, this is the core value proposition of Azure Active Directory, right? We will give you one set of credentials that will take you to any application on premise and in the cloud, thousands of applications. Applications that are already pre-created by Azure Active Directory, applications that you will build, applications that are built from others. Every application that is out there right now can be integrated with Azure Active Directory. And that's the main promise here. The second promise, the second use case that you can use Azure Active Directory is the ability to collaborate and do your job from anywhere in the world. So as I said, from any platform, Android, iOS, Windows devices, all platforms that are out there can be used to access your applications that are integrated with Azure Active Directory. And at the same time, something that we really believe is unique in Azure Active Directory, we provide the ability to invite any external user, your partners, vendors, your contractors, to access your applications that are protected by Azure Active Directory easily. We call that capability B2B collaboration, and really, in a really easy way, your users or administrators can invite external users with any email they have, from Gmail to Microsoft accounts, from their corporate email or anything else, can invite them through Azure Active Directory to access only the cloud applications or the on-premise applications they really want them to be invited. The third scenario is management access at scale. Management access at scale, of course, is a promise of Azure Active Directory, because without that, IT departments cannot use tools that complicated. Meaning that Azure Active Directory gives you the tools to manage the life cycle of the user in cloud applications and also monitor every aspect of your solution. And finally, the fourth pillar is, of course, security, cloud power protection, as we call it. And Microsoft is in a unique position here too, because you remember that Rick said in some point that there are billions of entry points out there, billions of entry points. It's almost impossible to control every entry point out there. So Microsoft is coming in with the experience we have in the cloud space and the experience we have gathered by all the consumer spaces we support, consumer services, from Xbox to Skype for consumers, from Outlook.com and Hotmail and all these services we run for years, and from the experience from attacks, if you want, in these clouds, and of course from the worldwide presence of Azure, we bring this experience in one machine learning engine that calculates the risk of every user and every integration he has against your systems. Let me say that one more time. Every time that a user is trying to access one of the resources that are protected behind Azure Active Directory, cloud or on-premises resources, Azure Active Directory has an invisible shield around you, a conditional access policy set that it can, of course, take under consideration simple things like the location of the user, the group of the user, or the device that the user needs. But most importantly, this cloud-powered protection calculates the risk of every user and every sign-in attempt So you can apply policies based on this risk. This is a unique differentiation of this solution. You don't have to rely on static rules. You can rely on a risk score that is calculated based on the experience of Microsoft from all these consumer and enterprise tools and clouds that we are running out there. And where SailPoint is coming to all this. Let me go back one by one and tell you where SailPoint and the governance capabilities that are integrated with Azure AD can help you here. Obviously, on the first pillar, SailPoint brings even more applications under the protection of Azure Active Directory. So applications that normally you wouldn't expect to see behind Azure Active Directory, now they can be there with SailPoint. And I'm talking from applications in the cloud that are specialized, or applications like that are on mainframes on premises. So definitely SailPoint makes these thousands of apps that Azure Active Directory can support even more. The second thing is collaboration. And in that second level, Azure Active Directory can also benefit from SailPoint, and you can benefit from that. And this can happen because with SailPoint, you can reset, for example, the passwords of your applications in even more cases. So while Azure Active Directory provides self-service password reset for cloud applications and integrated applications, SailPoint can give you self-service password reset for on-premise applications that were not in the past under Azure Active Directory protection. And of course, the third pillar is most probably one of the most affected by this integration, and SailPoint can help you there with deep and detailed life cycle management of the user. So when users join or move or leave the company and want to access specific applications across the cloud and on premises, SailPoint will be there to help you with the governance capabilities. And finally, I don't think that it's possible to have real security without governance. So SailPoint with governance capabilities can extend and make the protection that Azure Active Directory offers even stronger. So with that, I will give the floor back to Rick, and he will take you through a more detailed overview of the integration between SailPoint and Microsoft. Rick?
Great. Thanks, Nazos. Yeah, so that was a great summary by Nazos, giving an overview of really Azure AD in the access management capabilities it provides, and of course, SailPoint's core identity governance. Really want to focus now on what this integration looks like. This is more than just SailPoint connecting to Azure AD Premium as a target system, as an example. This is really first about providing an integrated solution that drives synchronization of lifecycle changes to the user access and tying that back to the Microsoft Access Panel. So as you'll see in the demo that Mike will share, as you go through the joiner, mover, leaver processes, lifecycle changes, someone onboards, someone moves to a new role, someone leaves the organization, anytime there are changes in user access that SailPoint administers, we're going to effectively, synchronize that with Azure AD and to the Access Panel to ensure that user access is constantly synchronized so they know the right access is being delivered at the right time, not only to ensure and protect the organization, but to establish that productivity that Nazos mentioned as well. The other piece of this that I think is really valuable is how we can balance and complement some of the areas of overlap, if you will, between solution sets. You'll see a user that wants to provide a simple password reset will do so from the Azure AD user interface, but they'll be able to leverage a lot of SailPoint's existing capabilities to be able to go and intercept that password change at AD and synchronize that out to other systems that may not be managed by Azure AD, where we can extend it out to other cloud or on-premises solutions as part of that. So whether that might be something like, say, SAP or ServiceNow or whatever it may be, we can help distribute that out to a broader set of applications. At the same time, we expand the provisioning capabilities that Azure has today. Azure AD has some very strong, as we know, group management and provisioning capabilities. But we at SailPoint can offer some much more fine-grained provisioning down at the entitlement level. I often describe this as, in some ways, not just giving the keys to the house, but giving someone the keys to the room within that house, and we provide that level of granularity in what we provision. So what does that look like, at an really architecture level here? This, as you can see here, you'll have an HR application, or this could be any authoritative source if it's, say, you're pulling in from contractors, say, at the database. And any sort of change notification that SailPoint receives out of this will trigger a lot of the core governance capabilities and controls that we have. That whole join remover lifecycle management pieces are something we put into play here. And as a basis of that, we might have downstream provisioning. But the key here is that we have the synchronization to Azure AD to ensure that any form of authentication or self-service password reset, or even provisioning events and activities that are performed through Azure AD, are synced and managed with SailPoint on the back end to support those additional use cases that I mentioned as it relates to the password management extension, the granular provisioning, or just the basic synchronization of the lifecycle management itself. So that gives you a high-level overview. To see this in action, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague here, Mike Kaiser, for a demonstration.
Thanks, Rick. What we're going to see here is similar to what you just saw before, what Rick showed you from a architecture perspective. This is the demo architecture we're about to see. You'll note that things are very similar to what you just saw, with the caveat being that obviously for clarity's sake there's a reduced set of applications that will appear both governed by SailPoint and provided access by Microsoft's Access Panel. What we'll do first is we'll go through use cases that cover both of our identity governance products, both the Cloud Delivered Identity Now and the On-Premises Identity IQ. And of course, first we'll do the meat and potatoes of identity governance, which is kind of a joiner, mover, leaver use case. And so the first use case we'll use is the joiner use case. This is typically what happens when someone comes and onboards in an organization. I like to use these kind of architectural data flow diagrams for clarity's sake. Architectures are helpful, but sometimes it's easier to see how the data is flowing. And what we'll see here is that the new user will be entered into the HR authoritative source. In this case, we'll use an open source HR application. And then SailPoint will pick up that change. Once it picks up the change, it will go out and create, of course, the account and the entitlements out in Microsoft Azure, along with any other applications that it needs to for the purpose of our demonstration. And then once that account is created, the end user will be able to log in to Microsoft's Access Panel and automatically have access to all the applications and resources they need to. So if we switch over to our demo system, we can see that we are logged into the Microsoft Access Panel, and we'll go ahead and access that open HR system. And keep in mind, this is, like I said, an open source facility that we're going to use here, but this could just as well be Workday or SAP HR or a variety of other things, just depending on what's in play. We're going to enter in some default settings here, really just to get the ball rolling for Tate. And as he does this, the idea here is that this stuff is all entered ahead of time so that when he walks in the door, he automatically has access to all the applications and resources he needs. We'll hit save on this, and then we'll switch over to actually see Tate logging in. We're going to wait for just 1 second. As you can see kind of a process here, the HR system will notify SailPoint. Normally this takes place on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis. Employees aren't onboarded instantaneously usually. For the purposes of our demo, there's a hook in it so that once we enter that new identity, it will go out and pick it up and actually go out and provision all of that. You'll note also on the applications on the right that there's a subset of what Tate needs access to. Tate is in the accounting department, and so therefore he will only have access to those applications he needs. In this case, SAP is needed by the accounting department, but Oracle and Salesforce, which will come into play later, are not used by the accounting department. So once we log Tate in, we can see that in fact he can access the Access Panel, and he has like I said before, a subset of applications that he can have access to. In this case, SAP is automatically present, and the minute Tate walks in the door, he can come down, sit at his desk, and get to work. So what he's done is he's been empowered to be immediately productive, but in a secure manner that's been governed by SailPoint. So that's our joiner overview. Now we move on to the mover. Tate is progressing through the business, and Tate is taking on new responsibilities, and he's changing job roles. And so in this mover case, what's going to happen is once again we have the change initiated in the HR authoritative source. Some attribute, some job title, in this case, Tate's department will change. And as a result, SailPoint will pick up that change, and it will do two things. It will take away the old access, it will deprovision it, both in Azure and other locations, and then it will also grant or create the new entitlements and accounts that Tate needs to do his new job. And then once that happens, he'll be able to log back in and see that change taking effect. So if we go back to our HR system, we'll pull Tate up. There he is. And we'll go to his job attributes, and we'll change him from accounting to finance, or finance, depending on where you come from. We'll go ahead and save that. And once that updates, what's going on here, remember, is that HR authoritative source is picking up that change, and SailPoint is going to be notified. It will pick up that change. And this is really a crucial time, a time when governance is most essential, because in a lot of organizations, what happens when someone undergoes a role change is that the old access, the old entitlements linger. And instead of removing the old access and granting the new, now you have excess entitlement and excess access. And this is a huge issue both for accounting and compliance, and really it just increases the risk for the business. And so what we're trying to do is ensure that the old access is taken away, the new access is granted seamlessly, and so that the end user, in this case Tate, has no hesitation with what he does. And so in our demo scenario, as we said before, Tate has access to SAP, but now that his role has changed, the SAP access will be taken away, and the Oracle and Salesforce access will be granted instead. If we log in as Tate again, and sometimes this happens automatically, but once we refresh, we should see that indeed SAP is gone, and Oracle and Salesforce are now in play for Tate. So his role has changed, but in a secure, governed manner. Now he has access to new resources, and he can take on his new responsibility as necessary. And then once Tate finishes his day, we're going to log out for the next part of the demo here. And the next part of the demo is actually the leaver use case. So Tate has progressed, but either he's done something really bad and has been terminated, or he's taken a new opportunity with a different company, and so he's leaving the organization. No surprise, we start again with the HR authoritative source, and he's registered as inactive or terminated, and then SailPoint will pick up that change and affect that change in a governed, secure manner, both to Azure AD and other applications, and then we'll see as Tate logs in that he will not be able to access any resources any longer. So, once again, we're in the orange HR system. We're going to edit Tate, and we're going to change him from an active employee, and we're going to make him inactive. So we'll save that change. And remember, as we do this, what's important to note is that a lot of companies, instead of removing those accounts or deleting those accounts or deleting that identity, the exact action taken here, as with all these other use cases, is going to depend on the business policy and how that influences the governance model. In other words, many companies, rather than removing those identities and removing that access, what they will do is instead they will leave it in place, but they will suspend it. They will make sure that it's never used again, at least in the short term. But what this does is it gives the company an idea of what Tate did or didn't do while he was here. It leaves the audit trail in place, it leaves the access in place, and if by chance Tate decides to come back and join the organization once again, you have continuity. The same idea, the same ID, the same accounts are used, and that audit trail is continued rather than being captured in a disjointed manner. Obviously, the logical overview here is pretty straightforward. Tate should just not be able to log in because that change has been affected. So we try and log in as Tate, and we can see that indeed there's no access to the access panel, and any other accounts have been suspended in the organization as well, even if he doesn't end around the Microsoft access panel. So that's the joiner, mover, leaver. Now, as I mentioned, there are key times for governance, and often with that mover use case and other use cases, there's a need for certification. Oftentimes, this can be event-driven, like in the mover use case, but it can also be a regular, periodic checking of access. And basically what this is doing is making sure that employees only have the access they need. And so once the certification is initiated, the reviewer will be notified that he needs to go and certify access. And key to this is that SailPoint has visibility into all applications, and so it'll pull in that data. It will give the reviewer the choice to revoke or approve them having that access, and then that access will be affected both for accounts and across applications and also in the access panel. But it's that visibility that's key for this. It's that visibility that enables us to govern everything, because you cannot govern everything unless you actually can see everything. And of course, in the real world, what you would see here is as those applications are revoked, that access would be taken away. We can see an example of this in Identity Now. We can actually jump in context right to the certifications within Identity Now as Andrew back here. And what we're seeing here is actually a application-based certification. In other words, what this reviewer is doing is reviewing access to Azure AD, and in particular, access to these particular tiles that appear on the access panel. As this manager comes along, can approve or revoke, as I mentioned before, any or all of these. And once the decisions are saved, SailPoint will go out and, much like the mover use case, remove any access that has been revoked, both to the access panel in this case, but also the wider systems. These certifications come in about 7 or 8 different types of certification. Not only is there an application certification, but there's also a manager certification where you're reviewing all access to all individuals that report to you. There's an application certification like this one. There are entitlement owner certifications. It's a wide range, and it depends on what the business policy is and what the audit and compliance needs are and what it needs to affect accurate governance. And a growing use case, side note, a growing use case is that many of our customers are utilizing event-driven certification, so that instead of doing continual periodic certifications, they will wait till, say, a mover use case and have a certification just for that one person to ensure that old access is removed. But certifications will ensure that people consistently have only the right access to the right applications and resources at the right time, no matter what process has been undertaken. Now, both Rick and Nasos mentioned about self-service password reset. And with SailPoint in play here, what we do, this is reading right to left instead of left to right, is the flow. And what's going on here is that the end user can initiate that self-service password reset from the Microsoft Azure facility. Once that is done, that password change will be written back to the local Active Directory, and at that point, SailPoint will intercept that password change and will extend out that password change to any applications that are not directly connected or tied into Active Directory. This could be custom homegrown applications. This could be mainframe. It could be just a range of other applications that may not have that linkage into Active Directory. And what SailPoint can do is ensure that password change takes place and ensure that it gets correctly spread out to the entire enterprise, so that once the password is changed from Microsoft Azure, it makes a change throughout the entire enterprise. And as I said before, that actually takes place from the Azure password reset facility. We won't actually make that change, but basically the user would fill out the old password and then create the new password, and as I said before, that would come down to the local Active Directory. SailPoint would pick up the change and would fan it out. Now, excuse me, one second. In Identity Now and Identity IQ, both of those have some configuration to determine which of those applications inherit that change from Azure Active Directory. Obviously, there are groups associated with that, and you can control the manner in which it spreads out to the enterprise as is appropriate for your individual needs. So, all that before, join, remover, leaver, certification, password change are all covered by both Identity Now, which is the cloud-based delivery of identity governance, and Identity IQ, which is the on-premise delivery. Keep in mind that both Identity Now and Identity IQ can cover the identity governance needs for the entire enterprise, no matter where they're located or no matter where they are delivered from. The next couple of use cases are going to be Identity Queue only, and they have to do with a little higher order security policy or segregation of duties. And we split this up into detective and preventative controls. Now, detective controls is where you have someone who has access to something that is not allowed by, say, a segregation of duty policy. And so the flow here is that, once again, SailPoint will take in all the entitlements and access from across the enterprise, and then it will compare it against existing security policy, and then it will notify if there are any accounts or identities in violation and ask a business reviewer to take action, and they can either suspend that account or suspend that part of that entitlement or approve both the entitlements with a comment on why that is the case. We'll see this in just a minute. And then, much like certifications, if access is removed, the end user will see that. In our case, we've set up a policy within Identity IQ that you cannot have Oracle and SAP at the same time. And so a reviewer will be prompted to remove one or the other of those. If we switch users real quick into a manager of Identity IQ, you can see that we went to the Microsoft Access panel, and then here we are in Identity IQ. Now, Catherine, who is our new user, has gotten some notification that there are policy violations for people who report to her. So she can either click on the email and jump right into context or come to her dashboard, and she can see that, in fact, Irene, one of her people that report to her, is actually in violation of the Oracle and SAP conflict rule that I talked about before. Now, Catherine has a couple of choices. She can either allow this violation to take place, in other words, say, yes, I know I'm breaking my own security policy, but I'm going to put a time box, a time limit on it, and document a reason why this should be allowed. And that will cause a review to come at the end of that time sequence, and it will establish a reason why the violation was allowed for auditing and compliance purposes. Or she can correct the violation, in which case she's going to be prompted to remove one or the other of these applications, and that correction will take place further downstream. So the other side of detective controls, correcting bad issues that are already existing or people in violation that already existed, is preventative controls. And this prevents, as new provisioning, as new access requests are made from the identity governance facility, this will ensure that policy is accurately enforced. So in this case, we'll see an access request initiated by the business reviewer or by the business user. That request will be found to be in violation of policy, and that user will be prompted to change that. And then once again, the same policy will be in place here. Oracle and SAP will be in conflict, and we'll make a request that has both of those, and we'll get a policy violation which shows us that is not a good idea. So still using Catherine here, we'll let her make an access request for Jeremy, one of her in report 2s. You can see that Jeremy is already selected. Usually it's a three-part process where you select who you're requesting for, what you want to request, and then you sanity check it and submit it. And what we'll do is we'll actually choose Oracle here as one part of our request, and then SAP as well. And you can see when we review it, basically we're asking for access to Oracle and SAP, and within Identity IQ, if this was granted, it would provision accounts on both systems and also adjust the Azure account so that these would appear in the access panel. And then once we hit submit, we'll see that this is in violation of policy. Identity IQ says, no, we're not going to let you do that and violate your own policy. And then optionally, you can configure it so that you could still submit it, but you would be required to give a documented reason as to why you would allow this. So by having both preventative and detective controls, we ensure that companies, as they adopt new security policies and put governance policies in place, that they can roll it out in a consistent way across the enterprise, bring the entire organization into an elevated security state that reduces risk, and then use preventative controls to ensure that future actions do not create new situations that occur and keep you in compliance with policy. So that kind of gives you a whirlwind view of how this integration works, and I'm going to hand it back to Rick.
So thanks, Mike. So yeah, I think lastly, I think really when we're looking at identity at work here, it really enables us to see everything, right? I think identity allows us to have connectivity to all apps, whether they exist on premises or in the cloud, and then be able to unify not only the administration of that access, but to bring that to the front door, the portal of a user access, in this case, Microsoft Access Panel. At the same time, it allows us to govern everything, really being able to not only establish proof points to validate who has access to what, but really make sure that we have processes in place to maintain that least privilege, delivering the access that users only truly need, not because they can have it. And then lastly, truly the ability to empower everyone. Get the right access at the right time to optimize business productivity. Embrace the lines of business users in a self-service capacity to participate in governance. And the way that we do that is making sure there's effective business translation in what we communicate to them so that we are not, delivering a rubber stamping compliance event, but really delivering effective governance. And so when that happens, we truly see how successful organizations can leverage the power of identity to become more of a business enabler, right? Securing their identities and securing their data, really ends up delivering a competitive advantage. And ultimately that will allow organizations to open the perimeter, have that business without borders, as Nazos mentioned too, enabling their users, and that really becomes the power of identity to be able to do that securely and confidently. So with that, I will turn it out over to Shay here, and we'll administer a few Q&A, a few questions that we may have.
Excellent. Just a reminder, if you have a question, please submit it in the Q&A panel, and we'll answer as many as we can in the time allotted. We'll go ahead and jump in. Our first question, so I currently have Identity IQ and know that we have a connector that we can use to connect to Azure AD. Is this integration the same? If not, how is it different?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think that, this, I hope you saw in Mike's demonstration in particular, this integration is much more robust than that. Don't get me wrong, there's value in the connector itself to be able to aggregate, identities and be able to, say, provision access down to Azure AD as necessary. But really, this integration is about establishing that lifecycle management of synchronization between SailPoint and Microsoft and the different target systems that you may have, so that as there's a joiner, a mover, or a leaver in the organization, to make sure that that access is automatically reflected in the Microsoft Access Panel. At the same time, the same thing could occur if it was in a certification, as you saw in Mike's demo as well. And then be able to extend that for password use cases, where if an end user is able to provide a password reset from Azure AD, to be able to intercept and capture that change and extend it out to a broader set of applications, whether they may be on premises or the cloud. And to be able to extend in a more granular fashion provisioning functionality as well, and complementing that with what Azure AD provides today. So this is a much more robust bidirectional integration than just a standard connector.
Excellent. Okay, our next question. We are a healthcare organization and we use Epic in our environment. How does this work with Epic?
Yeah, so I think that this is a good example of being able to determine, to have effective governance, you need to have visibility across all applications. And we've seen historically some applications, are historically more closed than others. And so I think that's been a challenge at times with some enterprise applications. Epic continues to evolve there. But yes, we have the opportunity to integrate with Epic to be able to bring in Epic users and administer them as you would any other target system. And this can be reflected with the integration with Microsoft. As you saw in the Access Panel that Mike was showing in the demo, there can be an Epic app, if you will, on that for authentication, as well as for administering that access for provisioning, for certification, the core governance capabilities. And it also brings up, because this is largely a very heavily used electronic medical record application, so healthcare customers are particularly keen on this. We actually have an upcoming healthcare webinar on June 1st for those of you that may be interested. But yeah, this is absolutely within scope and supports the Epic environments as well.
Okay, excellent. That's all the time we have for today. If you would like to learn more, please contact us using the number or email on your screen to get in touch with an identity expert today. Also, keep an eye out for an email from us tomorrow, which will include a recording of today's webinar. And thank you, Nastos. Thank you, Rick, for your presentation today. Thanks to everyone for joining. Have a wonderful day.